Your name is Nikki, but you call yourself...
No, my name is Adrien Amiro, and my middle name is Nicole, so I go by Nikki.
Let me ask you this. Do you think you have what it takes?
What it takes to what?
Do you have what it takes?
Yes?
Okay. Tell me about your car accident in January.
Damn you. I took a sharp turn after only having been driving for 2 years.
This is in Austin, right?
Yes, and I flipped my truck twice.
Wait, did you say after only having been driving for 2 years?
Yes, and I'm 35, so...
Okay, so you learned late, maybe, because 2 years is a lot of practice.
Well, yeah, at the time I'd only been driving for a year.
All right.
When I got in the accident.
But do you attribute that to your accident? Lack of experience?
Yes.
Well, maybe that says something about our driver's education programs.
I didn't get to go to a driver's education program.
Maybe that says something.
That says a lot, I think, actually.
So how did you get your license?
I studied and I failed my test 3 times, my driving test, and I just kept going back until I got it right.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
I'm going to flip this so I can see it. What you're saying is very entertaining. Okay, so you're not a natural.
No, not by any means.
Though I've often wondered to myself, genuinely, why aren't there more accidents? Doesn't it seem like the number of people who drive and the number of different kinds of people, old, young, responsible, irresponsible, quickly reflected, not quickly reflect, whatever that word would be. I'm surprised there aren't more and more accidents all the time.
Well, because somebody's got to be paying attention, right? I mean, when you're driving, you have to stay in kind of a high alert phase in order to...
It takes 2 people to make an accident.
It does.
Actually, but that's not so.
But not with me.
So tell us about your accident.
I was going to pick up roses. I was doing some home improvement stuff at my house.
Yeah.
And I took a turn that I was not prepared to handle and lost control of my vehicle, and it flipped twice. And I'm still here. Still here.
And calling it a vehicle, you revealed that you're from Texas.
Yes.
One more thing to say about accidents in general. I've also discovered that people generally need to drive at the worst possible times, meaning they need to drive when they're in a hurry. They need to drive when they're racing to someplace or racing away from someplace, or when they're frustrated, or there used to be this idea of going motoring. You know, I feel relaxed. It's like what hiking is to us. Motoring was to people in the 1920s or the 1930s. And we don't drive that way anymore.
Well, since my accident, I've taken some road trips. Like, I went to see my mother, and that's like a 5.5-hour drive, and stuff like that. And honestly, like, there's kind of a peace that you get from it, or that I've started to get from it, because it used to just be like I would feel so much anxiety over it. But then, like, after going on these long trips and things like that, and going to, like, Abilene to see my friend who was visiting from Korea and stuff like that, it was, I don't know, I think it's made me a better driver. Made you a better driver.
Do you feel like when you
I enjoy it more.
When you do these long drives, you're in the zone, or you're just not freaking out?
Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, I feel, I don't want to forget, I want to ask you about flipping and stuff like that, but just about...
We cannot, and that would be okay.
I do. I just want to say, I think in a way, there's a certain kind of safe driving we do when, in a sense, we're not paying attention. That is, sometimes you'll get in your car, you'll drive someplace, and you'll arrive, and you won't remember having driven there. You won't remember each turn. You won't remember, and that's because you're kind of tuned in.
You go on autopilot.
You go on autopilot, which is instinctual, but it also means that your senses are kind of, you're not daydreaming, you're on autopilot.
Right.
Good point. Okay, so you flipped over. Here's some of the emotions that have gone through me. Is my car flipped over twice through no fault of anyone but my own. I would have thought, and I have had accidents through no fault of anyone but my own. I would have thought, I'm going to die.
That thought did occur to me.
I would have thought I'm going to be disfigured and hurt.
That actually was not even, I was not even thinking about that.
I would have been mad at myself. Like, how did I do this? I wish I had gone slower. I wish I had taken the wider turn.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, self-anger.
Yes, a lot.
And then it's over so fast, but your mind is still going at that accelerated speed that, like, for days, or for me, I'll tell you about my situation. For days, you feel like your mind is going faster than the world around you, replaying the accident over and over.
It feels really surreal, like it's kind of like dreamlike after it happens. Like while it's occurring, like obviously you're in the moment and it's terrifying. But afterwards, there's this quality to it where, I mean, it happened, but it doesn't quite feel real. Like I remember it, but it was like you kind of separate from it in a way. Which I don't know if that's even a good thing, because it's one of those really clarifying moments.
Yes.
I mean, like, I should have died. Like, it's amazing that I'm still here.
My last dangerous episode in a car. So I told you that I totaled my car.
Yes.
That wasn't, in spite of the fact how intimidating that sounds. I was going about 5 miles an hour, and I hit a trailer hitch in front of me of a non-moving vehicle, and so it was not. It sounds like you total your car. You must be dangerous. Must be bad. Actually, it was the safest thing, and my car ran perfectly. It's just that the trailer hitch was at the height of my hood, so it crumpled all these expensive parts of the car, but nothing that would ever prevent me from driving it. But the dealership said that it's just worth it to get a new one, and so. But anyway, the last dangerous thing I did with my car was driving to New Mexico from Marfa, and it was really bright out. And I've learned in my old age that it's actually easier for me to drive long distances at night because the bright sunlight makes me fall asleep. Anyway, I was all alone on the road, thank Jehovah, and I was falling asleep. I woke up and my car was traveling in the desert, like over a cactus. I'd driven off the road. And in fact, if I had been awake, I would have been terrified to drive off the road. But I woke up after that incident occurred, that split second. And that just changed my attitude towards driving for a long time, because the fear of like going 40 miles an hour, because I decelerated because my foot came, but 40 miles an hour literally over sand and gravel and desert cactuses and things like that really put the fear of Zeus.
I think that driving should be scary.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not scary, you kind of take it for granted, and I think that's when things happen. Mind you, like, since I started driving, it's always been like terrifying, because I think I waited so long to get my driver's license in the first place. It built up in my head, so I had this whole, like, giant fear of it. And as the years passed, it just got worse and worse and worse. But it was something that I had to do, so I made myself do it anyway. And
you got back on that horse.
I did.
Right.
And now I kind of enjoy it.
Well, this brings me, in a roundabout way, to asking you about 2010, around the time I met you, 2011, 2010?
Yeah, actually, that would be about 2010, or maybe it was 2009, actually. It was 2009.
Maybe so, because I remember you being, no, it had to be 2010, because anyway, I don't recall. No, maybe you're right, but anyway, it was likely 2010, but I remember you being hot, but perhaps a hot mess, as they say. But I remember one of the fascinating things that I recall is that you did not have a driver's license then.
Yes, no, I did not.
And which in Texas, that's a big deal because the distances are so big.
Well, but I was from Massachusetts, and public transportation up there is, I mean, you can just you can either walk, take a bike, or you can take a train, or you can take the subway. Like, public transportation's not an issue up there.
How long had you lived in Massachusetts?
I lived there from the time I was in 5th grade till most of high school. And then I moved down to Texas, but then I would go up and visit because I have family up there and stuff like that. And yeah, so it was never a priority.
And in spite of that indication of not being particularly worldly, in one sense you were far more worldly than I was, because you had been married and I had never even come close.
I had.
Tell me.
Although I don't think it really counts. Because,
why is that?
Well, I was only married for 4 months, and I was very young.
Mm.
And I was younger than my years at the time, too.
When did you get married? How old were you?
I was 20.
Were you in love?
I don't think so.
Did you think you were?
I don't know. I didn't date in high school or anything like that. I thought the gentleman was wiser than I was, and that, I don't know.
I see the facial expression, which can say wordlessly, "What the fuck was I thinking?"
No, that's exactly it. Like, and the deal is, I knew better. It's just some really bad stuff had happened, and
Any port in a storm. An expression meaning when there's bad stuff going on, you don't get the chance to pick and choose what your comfort will be.
Right. And so I thought that someone, in my opinion, that could teach me things and that knew more about life than me and things like that. Like, I thought that was what a relationship was based on, I guess. Like, I thought I had a lot to learn and all of these things. And so, like, I thought he was helping me be a better person. That's what it was. Like, I thought he was helping me be a better person.
And did it turn out you were wrong?
Very, very.
And what was the tip-off?
Well, the day after we got married, he turned out not to be a very nice person.
The day after you got married?
Yeah.
So you say it lasted 4 months. In reality, it lasted 24 hours.
I mean, the nice part did.
Well, that's the part that counts. Right?
Well, marriages are interesting things. I mean, there's nice parts, and then there's hard parts, and like, I've been married to my husband now for 6 years, just about, and you know,
And it's a roller coaster.
It is. But at the end of the day, he's still my favorite person.
Right.
Even when I
No, you don't need to go into it, but I get what you're saying.
But with my first husband, I had no experience. I lived in like this imaginary world where, you know, all of my life experience up until that point was through books and movies and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I had all of these, you know,
I
notions, and sometimes reality is not like that at all. Actually, most of the time.
I would say reality is many things, but it's never what you expect.
No.
And if reality is what you expect, it's usually a sign that you're being delusional. You're lying to yourself.
That is very true.
But you know what my mind races to? It races to Nicole's, Adrien's, of like the 19th century or whatever, anywhere, just before you could get divorced.
Well, and they had no options.
They had no options. And imagine this tragedy. You get married, and 24 hours later, you feel like you're in a thorn bush or quicksand or even worse, and there's no escape. This is your life.
I wouldn't have survived it.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be here in the 19th century in that situation. Like, I would have perished.
Well, so what was the tip-off that you got to get divorced? That it was not just a rocky road, but a reason to leave.
This is really hard to talk about. I actually don't talk about this with many people. He was really, like, physically abusive.
But only after the marriage?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was awkward, and he didn't want me, and this is common in those types of relationships, like, he didn't want me hanging around with my friends. I wasn't allowed to, see my friends, and I was still going to college at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was afraid to, like, ask him if I could do things, or, like, well, I was just constantly afraid, actually. But the funny thing is, we were going on a field trip to the Fort Worth modern museum. And my friend Dottie, who's been like my best friend for a very long time, like I've known her for forever. We know where the bodies are buried. And she had invited me to spend the night at her house so that we could catch the bus together to go on this, this field trip. And I got the courage to ask him if I could go, and he said I could. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, things are going to get better. Like, it's going to get better. It's going to be okay, right? So I had the most beautiful day at the art museum. It was fantastic. I did something totally goofy, and the glass windows, like, I don't know if you've ever been, but like there's all these glass windows, and I thought a door was open and it wasn't, and I walked straight into the glass window and fell. And it was hilarious. Like, if you can't laugh at yourself, then what are you gonna do? And like, it was such a refreshing day. And I got home to my husband, and he wouldn't talk to me. He was writing a letter, and he was writing a letter to me because he didn't want to talk to me. And finally, he looked up, and I was just standing there, like, waiting for him to say something. And he finally looks up at me, and he's like, "Did you see the truck?" The vehicle. And I was like, no. And so I went outside, and he had crashed the truck. And then he hands me this letter, and I guess while I was gone, he had met up with his ex, and I guess he was heading over to her house and was going to, have an affair or whatever. And instead he accidentally ran the truck into a wall. And
wow, I think a good Jungian psychologist would say you don't accidentally
run into a wall.
Right?
Well, I don't think he was sober at the time. And so then he got mad at me for being upset, and it was not, when he got mad, it wasn't pretty. And so that week, I told my friend Valerie that I just needed to stay a couple nights at my mom and figure shit out. Sorry for cursing. Anyway, to figure stuff out, and she can't open that door.
Well, help her. Okay. I'm going to make sure that this is good, working good. Okay.
You're welcome, love.
Your phone's out here. Do you want me to bring it in?
Yes, please. Oh, my God. But, I never went back. I stayed at my mom's. That was it. I left. I didn't know I wasn't going to go back. I just knew I had to get out of there at the moment.
Yeah.
And while I was staying at my mom's, he attacked me at work. I was working at the school.
Wow.
And so the school security. He was a little bit older than me, but not too much. I think he'd lived a lot more than I had at that point, but
not successfully.
It didn't make him a nice person.
Well, okay. I let's leave that behind. I just want to say thank goodness for divorce.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why I got divorced was I realized that there were parts of myself that I liked, because he didn't like any part of me. Like, I had to get rid of all of my music and all of my books and like...
Well, one more question. I don't want to dwell on him except to ask this. Have you been in touch with him since the divorce?
Never. No.
Okay.
No. I've seen him twice since. The first time really scared me. The second time, he showed up at an art opening in Houston, Texas when I was doing volunteer work at Lawndale Art Center, and I saw him, and I guess he saw me, but the other volunteer was like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" And it's like, "Nothing, I just see someone I used to know." And that was really, like, the honest truth.
Move on to more pleasant days.
Thank you. That would be swell.
How'd you end up in tiny Marfa, Texas?
While I was going to college, we did volunteer work.
College at Odessa, Midland.
At Odessa, yes.
By the way, is there a different school at Midland than Odessa, or is there one school for both those communities?
There's two different schools in Midland. There's one college in Midland College, but it's only a 2-year university. And then there's UT Permian Basin in Odessa. And then there's Odessa College also in Odessa. So they're...
Okay, so you were visiting from school.
Yes, we did volunteer work at the Chinati Foundation for like 5 years.
This signal means I'm upset, and I have to interrupt.
Okay.
that volunteer work, instead of doing, I'm trying not to hate things anymore, but Shinati is just like tweaking my snout here.
Why?
Because instead of doing volunteer work for old people or hungry people or people can't walk or people who can't or walk into glass walls and windows and things like that, I'm doing my volunteer work for Chinati? Come on, man.
Well, considering the fact that I was going for an art degree, doing volunteer work...
I'm not knocking you.
No. But
knocking
this
them.
is the deal. Like, doing volunteer work centered around art when they open up the museum to everybody, like, those installations do have to be protected. Like,
I'm saying pay her. That's what I'm saying.
Nobody pays for anything anymore.
Okay.
Although, when I interned, I mean, Shinati is one of the few places that actually do give a stipend to their interns. Not very much, but they also give you a place to stay. And then you get like $100 a week or something. Or at least that's how it was when I was there. That was lifetimes ago now.
And that was your introduction to Marfa.
My introduction to Marfa was the volunteer work and...
It was art.
Yes.
Right.
And...
Because my introduction was social. I didn't even know the art component of the town. I really didn't. Okay.
But yeah, no, I thought it was magical. And I got to... Nick Terry actually let me do all of my volunteer work during their open house program at the Kabikoff building, which is my favorite installation because it has stories in it. Have you been there?
No, I don't think so.
It's the abandoned Russian schoolhouse by Ilya Kabikoff.
Oh, sure.
That is one of the most beautiful art installations. Like, it still like gets an emotional reaction from me every time.
Let me tell you about growth.
Yes.
And just ignorance. I went to visit it early on. I didn't like it. I didn't get it. And then people explained it to me. And I'm not easy to persuade. I'm trying to, the Lord is working with me on that, but I'm trying to become easier to explain things to and teach and things like that. But people explained the Kabikoff place to me.
How did they explain it to you?
Well, the first thing I saw was, this is this guy's Russian schoolhouse from when he was a kid. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, it's just a dirty rundown building. He could have labeled it anything, but he called it his, schoolhouse from when he was a kid. It seemed arbitrary. It seemed easy. It seemed insignificant, and it seemed...
You didn't read any of the little snippets from these, like, imaginary children, which could be stories from any child.
Right.
And I'm a sucker for a good story. And they're beautiful. Like, you get to see these tiny little imaginary lives of these people that were part of this community, and that's imaginary too. It's a fairy tale.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. And when I was kind of hip to that and let myself just, soften a bit to absorb these great ideas coming from this piece, what do you call it, an installation?
It is an installation piece.
I grew to really appreciate it.
It's one of the most beautiful installations I've ever seen, and I guess it just spoke to me. And the fact that the building's in a constant state of dilapidation, like it's falling apart, but there's still these things that remain, the things that are left over.
Yes, exactly. The building's falling apart. The time is disintegrating, but the ideas and the spirit of those kids actually is the most durable part of
it
them.
is. Like, I still remember there's this one about this kid who was searching for this fly that no one had ever seen, but he knew that was out there, and he catches it, and you look at the little display table, and of course the fly is gone. It's beautiful.
Which connects, I think, a little bit. I was telling you about my 6-month obsession with Shirley Temple in 2016.
Yes.
And as weird, if not illegal, as it can sound to be obsessed with a 6-year-old,
It depends on your motivations with that.
I discovered Shirley Temple movies in January of 2016, and I used her as a role model. Because not as a kid. I think
that's legal.
Yeah, I think that's legal too. But she was absolutely extraordinary. In addition to being darling, she is the wisdom of every movie she's in. She's the adjudicator of all these confused adults who are guided by passions of jealousy and envy.
And she's a symbol of hope.
She's a symbol of hope. But yeah, I was going to say she's an embodiment of hope. just the way she dances and the way she trudges through and struggles and things like that. And she gets, well, Mr. So I don't think it's that distant from what you're saying about the schoolroom, where these kids have these, these journals that are so meaningful. So anyway, you're in Marfa. What are your experiences with drinking in Marfa? Let's get down to it.
Okay, so
You're not. Don't. You're sighing as if they weren't valuable experiences.
No, they were. I learned the most horrible parts of myself while I was in Marfa.
You learned great parts of yourself.
I did
too.
that
Joy.
too.
A tree should never be ashamed that it was once a seed. And seeds need to drink.
Water's much better than the dehydration of alcohol.
Had you been drinking before you got there?
Not really. I didn't even start drinking until I was 20.
And we should let the people on the other side of this interview know that the pastime of Marfa is not art, it's drinking.
Well, there's not
With
a whole lot of things to
side.
do, and if you want to be social and like hang out with people, or really if you're bored, that's what you do, is you go and you drink. And I didn't expect that, and I certainly didn't expect that from myself. But like that term you used earlier, I was a hot mess. Although I did have a lot of fun. I got to dance a lot. I still remember dancing with you.
You're a great dancer. I'm much better. I'm much better than I was then.
I haven't been dancing in years.
When we stand up,
now.
I'll show you a few things. I've had a variety of phases. Charleston.
Really?
Yeah.
When I moved to Austin, they used to have these things called the vintage vivants, where you dressed up like you were like 1920s attire, and they would always be themed, like circus themed or like French themed, and they would have like music and stuff like that, and they would serve like 1920s drinks, and like everyone was just decked out in the 20s, and like people would be doing the Charleston, and it was magical. Like some of the best nights I had in Austin, they don't do them anymore, but they were wonderful.
I remember the Padres dance floor. I just remember one of the things I loved about it is when there was no one there. It was like having an auditorium to yourself.
I didn't even care because, I just had a good time.
You could dance all alone in that building because who would be there at breakfast or lunch or whatever.
I did. There was one time where a concert was going on at a different venue. And I just hung out with Yvonne at Padres, and we danced and played like the little Pac-Man game and stuff like that. It was a good night, actually, because it was, I don't know, it was...
I have good memories of it. Who were your friends back then?
Well, you. Nick Terry, of course. He's the one that gave me my internship.
Nick Terry seems to be so much quieter than I am, so much wiser than I am. He has a much more settled...
He's one of the most kind human beings.
Efficient. How can someone like both Nick Terry and myself? I would think I like Nick Terry, but that Oslo, he's so obnoxious and loud. What a loud mouth. He's always like shooting off his mouth.
No, Well, I thought you
I wish you could be more like Nick Terry.
I have never said that, ever.
Okay.
No.
I think he has. He's like, I wish this guy was more like me.
He probably says that about me, too, actually. He's always the person, especially when I'm having, like, a freak out about something art-related. Like, I'll message him and be like, okay. Like, when I had my Game of Thrones interview and everything like that, and I was going to Ireland, I was like, what if I don't get the job? What if this? He's like, worst case scenario, you're in Ireland. Just enjoy the experience, no matter what happens. And, of course,
That's what happened.
I did get the job. I just couldn't take it. And so
Which raises a few questions. Like, you didn't figure that out before you got to Ireland?
Well, I thought I would get to do it for, like, a couple weeks, or I would be able to work and ship the pieces. But I didn't know what to expect when I got there. But honestly, I should have been a little more realistic about the situation. But I was too
It's like getting married for the first time.
Yeah, pretty much. But I was too excited about it, and it was wonderful.
But in any case, Nicholas Terry was a stable voice of reason.
He still is. Mm-hmm. He still is. Like I said, I mean, that was just, a little over a year ago that I went over to Ireland.
So friends included me, Nick Terry, Rose.
Mm-hmm.
Kat?
Oh, yes. Oh, my God, I love Kat. Mm-hmm. She was wonderful.
Are you still in touch?
We talk every once in a while. And Brady Bonney, of course, who worked at the coffee shop at the time. I actually helped him pack up and move from Marfa when he moved to New York.
Was he a cartoon drawer? Or what?
He worked for comic books.
A graphic novelist artist?
I think he actually was a writer. Is a writer. He writes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's still one of the best people. Like, I keep in contact with him very frequently. He's one of the best people from Marfa that I know.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. We'll keep it short and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So Marfa turned out to be too much fun.
Yeah.
And also, I'm going to help. I'm going to help because
Okay.
I've seen this a lot.
I love you, Candace.
In addition to being too much fun, there's, in a certain way, there's not a lot of opportunity in Marfa. There's not a lot of jobs. There's a lot of drinking.
Yeah.
And it's a really small town. As cool as it is a really
The
small
deal
town.
is, all my experience up until that point had been, visiting and being surrounded by art. And the idea of being constantly surrounded by art sounded like one of the most romantic, perfect things I could think about. So all I wanted to do was like work around art and be around it because it inspired me. And I make jewelry and I paint, and so I thought it would be this really great environment for me. But what actually happened was I got exactly what I wanted. I was working at Gallery Urbane after my internship at Chinati, and I was living in the place I'd always wanted to. I was crashing at my boss, who was Rose. I was crashing at her place.
Who was the guy you were staying with in Alpine?
Andrew Suber. I rented a room from him.
You rented a room from him?
Yes.
Look me in the eye.
I rented a room from him.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, there was nothing. That was not a thing.
Okay.
So yeah, I rented a room from him, and I nannied when I was in Alpine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was miserable. And I wouldn't admit it to myself because I got exactly what I wanted, but I didn't really like the person I was turning out to be.
I didn't slap you and say you were miserable? I didn't tell you that truth?
No, actually, what you told me was that I was in the right place.
You know what I learned from my
That you're not giving advice anymore?
Well, I had actually learned that before, but that just was part of my continuing process of really embedding it in myself. This is the deal. If you ever look, not that people have this opportunity very often, but let's say you're in a restaurant, you're at a Boy Scout troop, or you're at a football game or whatever. If you look at someone give advice to someone else, the ultimate beneficiary of it is the person who's giving advice.
Because
They feel smart. What they're saying isn't going to really touch them. They're not the one who's going to, do this or not do that. They feel wise. They feel like they've been approached and they're smart and important. And
that can be true, but honestly, when you get really good advice, because sometimes people can see things, like it's hard to step outside of
new
yourself.
pair of eyes kind of thing.
Yeah, and so getting someone else's perspective, especially someone that you respect or admire, that can be extremely beneficial.
My problem is not with, first of all, people like comfort, and I believe that people should comfort each other. But as far as the content of advice, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think it's kind of 50-50 whether it's good or bad. But I think that it's the roles that giving advice puts us in, where one person is supposed to be smarter than he is, and the advice taker is supposed to be dumber than he is. And
I actually completely agree with you. I thought
you weren't that lost.
I wasn't that lost. I just thought I was.
And
I was taking advice from everybody because I thought everybody was smarter than I was.
Mm-hmm.
I had, like I said earlier, I had serious hero worshipping issues while I was in Marv. Mind you, I did get some good advice moments, like David Tompkins telling me that being in Marfa would add dimensions to my character. That did.
Is that advice, or is that just a description? Is that like saying those walls are made out of bricks?
That's a good question.
But ultimately, what you did, no sane person would ever have advised you to do, and it turned out to be right. No one would have said, if you'd said, hey, should I just get in a car tomorrow without any preparation and leave with no provision?
I think if people trusted their gut instinct more, they'd get in a lot less trouble. Like, if you have that feeling like that like your body's telling you to just do something, you should do it. Like, you need to learn how to trust yourself, which is something that I've struggled with and I've finally learned how to do at the ripe old age of 35.
But I've told you this more than once. I really learned something from that. I shouldn't say don't give advice like that's a rule of talking. I guess what I learned from that is don't accept the role of being this wise, sagacious, knowledgeable advice giver, because it's a role, and it's no different than the role of being the lost, befuddled advice seeker. They're both roles, and neither are true. And that incident with you really showed me that.
This is my best friend, Candace.
Hey.
She and I are here working together. Yeah. We've been published in Vogue together and Dark Beauty. She is honestly the most hardworking photographer that I know. She gets published more than any photographer that I know.
And anyway, the bottom line is this. Let's get up to the point we were. I gave you terrible advice. This is what I saw. I remember one day you looked a little ragged. You were jumping into a car, and I said, Adrien, I said, no, Adrien, where are you going? Are you going to Alpine? Are you going to get coffee? Maybe you're driving around the block. You said, I'm leaving.
You were the only person I said goodbye to.
Thank you. And I said, don't go, because it seemed like you were doing something rash. It seemed like you were getting...
I was.
Okay.
It was.
Well, you describe it.
Well, it was probably the most random decision I've ever made, like, despite the fact that I can be kind of unpredictable at times, that, like, especially when it comes to, like, moving, I always have a plan. Mm-hmm. You know, it's always, okay, like, things might not work out or whatever, but, like, I have an initial way to start something. This was a good friend of mine came into town that had known me from high school. We had dinner, and she just flat out looked at me and was like, you don't look happy. And for the first time since I'd been to Marfa, I was able to admit to myself, I'm not. And she's like, I have to go back to Midland after this. I think you should come with me. And I tried to come up with some excuses at first because I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to give up because that's kind of what it felt like. But I was living in an artistic place, and I hadn't created anything in like 6 months. Like, no jewelry, no painting, nothing.
Yeah.
I wasn't being true to myself while I was there at all. And so I was like, you know what? Okay, if I'm going to leave, we have to do it now. So we went, packed up our stuff. I went, found you, said goodbye. And I left, and 2 weeks later I moved to Austin, which was just completely random, but it was the right decision.
It was the right thing to do. Well, my take is that it wasn't random. It was sudden and it was unplanned. But it was the opposite of random, because instinctually you didn't quit, you stopped. Instinctually you knew that when you're in, what I think it was Winston Churchill said, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. And instinctually, you knew that things weren't working out for you, health-wise, mind-wise, whatever. And the one way to stop or to change directions was to both stop and change directions. And you just did it literally.
I did.
And you didn't...
It was my birthday, too.
I didn't realize that.
Yes.
It was your birthday.
It was my birthday.
Even more poetic. And you did it in the most available means you had. Someone pulled up in a car and said, let's go.
Let's go. And that was it. I packed up my stuff from Rose's. And we just did. And then I obviously could not stay in Midland. I made a promise to myself when I left that place that I would never live there again. Mm-hmm. So, because I'm pretty sure that's what hell looks like. Mm-hmm. There's some great people that live there, and my family lives there now.
I can guarantee you hell has a lot more personality than Midland.
I believe you, and probably smells better, too.
Well, I'll catch us up for the Latin. Let's do a couple more minutes. But
okay.
Turned out to be a great decision.
Yes.
And from there, you married an old friend.
Yes, I did.
Had 2 great kids.
They're awesome.
Got a career making stuff, doing art.
Yeah.
How long were you in Austin before you had washed or rinsed the last residue of Marfa from your hair?
Obviously, I still haven't, because I still have...
You're talking to me.
I know. I'm talking to you. I still talk to Nick. I was in Marfa actually a few months ago to have coffee with Nick. And
When did you feel, though, that you had that life that you were living there was not really part of the world that you now inhabit?
As soon as I left.
Wow. Huh.
As soon as I left. When I made that
Zipes.
decision, that was it.
Zipes. That's what in comics, if you look at comics, wow is like doesn't even mean wow anymore. They have to say zipes. For it to really mean something. How long before you got married?
a year and a half, but he and I had been friends for 7.5 years before we ever started dating.
How long before you had a show?
I believe it was 3 months. I booked the show before I left for Austin, actually. I figured out that's where I wanted to go because...
So there was more preparation than you let on.
Well, not at first. When I left Marfa, it was...
Oh, you did it from Midland.
Yes.
Got it.
I took 2 weeks to kind of gather myself. Like I said, it's... I usually have some kind of plan.
Hey, let's wrap up, but I want you to explain who that person is.
That is Candace Guy, and she is one of the most phenomenal photographers that I work with.
Would you give her BFF status?
Oh, yes. She is my best friend, period, paragraph, end of story. She's wonderful.
Oh, well, let's see. What would that be? Period, BPPES.
Yes. No, she's great. She's one of the truly creative people, and we work so well together. Our thoughts, like where her start, mine will end.
You cannot keep shifting BFFs like that. How long has she been your BFF?
3 years.
Because, the second F means forever.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't just throw people away.
Slow to hire, slow to fire.
Right. You have to be.
You say goodbye.
Goodbye. Does that work?
Sure.
I thought you were leaving.
Do you have any questions for me?
Um...
I'm sorry, I can't answer that. No, go ahead.